everybody. Welcome to a very unusual episode of Radiorama where, as the name implies, I show you how to work on radios and stuff from the 1930s through about the 1960s. And today we have this Chinese-made Red Lantern model 711-Z. And this was, I don't know much about this at all. I've never seen, now granted it seems funny to say, wow, a Chinese-made radio when practically everything's made in China today, but this is from 1973 and was made back when China was completely isolated from the rest of the world. I didn't find much about the company. It was made by Shanghai Radio Factory number 3, and from what little I could gather, there was a cotton gin or cotton mill and an electronics manufacturer that got put together to make Shanghai Radio Factory number 3. If there's anyone from China watching this, you can correct me. There was an interesting tidbit that said that the original name was called Meiduo, and there was a note that said this name was given by capitalists, and we will not tolerate that. Hence, they decided to name it Red Lantern. It is, even though it's from 1973, it is hilariously outdated. It's more like a 1950s type radio using what looks like Russian tube types. And a lot of those Russian tube types are close clones of European and American tubes, except maybe they did this on purpose. Every single one of the tubes I looked at, they're modern, well, not modern, they're American or European equivalent tubes were wired differently. In some cases, the filaments were wired differently, so I'm hoping that none of the tubes are bad in this, because if they are, I'm either going to have to find some Russian tubes, which, since we're not really trading with Russia for good reasons right now, might be hard to find. And finding Chinese tubes, forget it. I tried to find this radio online. I even looked it up in Chinese. I found one reference. There's someone trying to sell one for $800. Like, I'm sorry, that's a lot of money. This was donated to our museum. We're going to keep it because there's probably hardly any of these in the U.S. And it's just an interesting piece of history. And it's also fascinating to me that for a Chinese domestic market set, it does have a lot of English on it. Now, someone suggested maybe they sold these in Hong Kong, and Hong Kong being a British-controlled place at that time, a lot of people spoke English. Maybe. Again, others can correct me if I'm wrong. This is the power cord on it, and this is the plug, which has come apart. Looks like someone, I don't know if someone added this plug later or what. It is Chinese. It says Kuai LU, 250 volts, 6 amps. I can't imagine that this holding or being able to withstand 6 amps, but, and here's the tubes in it. I should have notated what tubes is what, because it does not have an indicator of what goes where. I mean, here's one, for example. I'll be very careful with it. 6N2. That looks like it's got a Chinese character there with the atomic symbol. And 6K4. Let's see what this one is. No markings. That could be the rectifier. And now it won't go back in because obviously I'm filming it. Crap, go back in there. This is, all right, bad video production. Ideally what I'd like to do is just get it up and running and hopefully on original components, because we're not going to plug it in every day and be like, look, it works. We're going to instead have it displayed as part of our international radio collection. We have radios from all over the world, but we don't have a pre-modernized China radio. Very unusual. Maybe one of the rarest sets in the collection. Looks like you got an eye tube up here. It's missing the speaker. I don't know why that speaker's missing. I couldn't find one that size. I found a replacement that will fit. I can just screw it in there so it'll make a noise. Now, I did try to bring it up on a Variac at the museum and nothing happened. So the first thing I was going to try was to test the fuse, but this is the fuse and I could not figure out how to get it out. I don't want to damage it. So that's where we are. And so I think what I'm going to do is take the guts out and we're just going to take a look around and see what's going on inside. Well, here is the underside of it. I just took the knobs off and all the screws. Here's the eye tube. It says it is a 6E2. That sounds familiar. 6E2. Let's put that somewhere where I won't lose it. Because if I lose any of this stuff, forget it. It's interesting. The capacitors are written in not Chinese either. It's got values on it that I can fully understand. 0.047 microfarads. 0.01. I'm sure these guys have some sort of markings on them too, these electrolytic capacitors. And this is the fuse, and it looks like you're supposed to squeeze and get it off. Okay, I just didn't want to break anything. I just wanted to see how it was put together. And I'll need to test that fuse to see if it's any good. I'm guessing that says fuse and probably has a value. So let's get this fuse out of here. See if it's any good. It looks like at least there's a wire there. We'll have to test that switch to see if maybe the switch is no good. Because if the fuse is good. Now the other thing too is I didn't have 220 volts handy. I had 120. But I should have at least seen something happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get out my high voltage rig. And I'm going to first test that fuse to make sure it's okay. Does it say anything on it, what the amperage is? It says 1 amp. Okay, good. Again, I want to test that. And I definitely want to have a fuse in there because if I blow anything, I want the fuse to blow before I blow any of these very difficult to get at or replace parts. It's not the most complicated thing I've ever seen. It looks like maybe this capacitor is ruptured on the end. And I really don't want to replace anything if I can't help it. But I might have to replace those. I just want to see if this has any life at all. I mean, worst comes down to worst, even if this does not work, it's still going to be an interesting conversation piece in the museum, but I'd rather it work because that'd be fascinating. So let me test that fuse to see if it's any good. You know, I get so distracted sometimes that I forget to film what I'm doing, so I'm really sorry about that. Especially with something unusual like this. So what I did was, I remember when I first tested it, this on-off switch felt kind of funny. Like it felt like it wasn't like making that nice satisfying clicking sound. And I thought, well, maybe it's just how it is. It's a Chinese radio. I know nothing about these. But then I just had a hunch. I was like, maybe my hunch is right. And so what I did is I squirted a little bit of WD-40 and I also heated some of the back lugs on this volume control. And what that does is it kind of degunks it a little bit. So now it started making a much more crisp on and off sound. And so what I did is I decided to bring it up slowly on my Variac. This is my 220 volt supply, and I'm a little nervous about it. So I just decided to hook everything up so I'm not anywhere near to touching it. And I'm bringing it up on my Variac, and right now I've got 50 volts, so probably there's about 100 volts in the set. I just want to let it sit here for just a little bit, because I don't want to bring this up real quick, especially if it's been off for who knows how long. I'm guessing it's been off since it came from China. The other thing is there's this big length of wire that was added to the other end, and it was just hand twisted on, so that wasn't great either. It's this ancient Chinese electrical tape. Anyhow, what I'm doing is I'm sitting here and I'm monitoring the B plus, and it seems like it's been slowly coming up. Right now it's at 20 volts, and so it's not anywhere close to warming up, but that's good. Again, I don't want to stress out the capacitors. If it starts making a really loud hum, then I'm going to have to replace at least the electrolytics. And if I do replace any of these components, I think what I'll do is I'll put them in a bag and tape them to the inside of the cabinet. So if someone else is more skilled than me, wants to restuff those components, they can. But I get a sneaking suspicion it might just work. Even if it works poorly, that's okay. Again, I just want to keep this as preserved as it is without overhauling. And if it was an American set, it's like, screw it. There's 10 million billion of these things, so it won't matter unless it's a very rare American set. But at least for the US over here, again, this is rarer than hen's teeth. I know I keep on going on and on about it, but I've always wanted to work on one of these just because I was curious. Well, I'll be damned, the thing works. I've been slowly bringing it up, and right now B plus only has 80 volts on it, but already it works. I knew I had to turn it to the local Chinese language station, so I did.
Here again is God the Father Almighty. Nancy. This was no remedial action. No last band-aid effort stuck on a wounded world.
I can't believe that works. Dare I hope that the iTube works? I don't have it up all the way either. It's got filament. Anyway, I need to make sure what my voltage is here before I get too crazy. I get a feeling it's definitely not up all the way by a long shot. But also, again, I don't want to stress these components out. I want to be easy with them for a little bit. Well, the radio works. That much seems true. And I let it run for a while, and it didn't seem like anything was really happening other than the radio working fine. So I have decided, again, because this is a museum piece, that I'm going to clean this up and just basically keep it as is. I'm going to do a few maintenance things like clean the volume controls, clean the band switch here, also oil the tuning condenser a little bit. But anyway, here's one of the electrolytics up here, 40 microfarads, 450 volts DC. I understand that. Here we have the power transformer with all the taps written out pretty cleanly. You've got 220 volts. That's probably 220 volts in. Then you got the 6.3 winding for the filaments. There's another tap for 230 volts. I can't tell what that says. I think that might say 250. So I'm guessing maybe they had multiple voltages in China. I know nothing about the power grid from that era. over there. Uh, you can tell that someone must have had to sit there with a grinder to do that. And you know what? Like, yeah, it's kind of crude, but it works. It gets the job done. But the fact that it still works, I mean, I'm kind of impressed by the fact that this was probably stuck together with who knows what, probably ancient machinery. There was probably a lot of hand manual labor involved here too. Makes me wonder, some of the Soviet radios I've worked on, they were extremely expensive and almost unobtainium for the general population. I'm not sure what the situation in China during the 70s would have been. It's not 1973, that's right after Nixon had gone over there. And I think they had just barely started to open up a little bit. But I don't know if anyone's from China who can understand what I'm saying. Feel free to jump in and let me know if I'm getting anything right or wrong here, because I would be genuinely curious what the availability was to the general population at that time period. Okay, well, I spent way more time than I usually spend cleaning the chassis up, just because I just wanted to see what this looked like a little more up close. And now that it's cleaned up and you're like, wow, look how clean that is, and I just have to remind myself, and I felt so strange when I had this thought, which was, this set is basically just a smidgen older than me. So in reality, it's not that old. It's a 40-something-year-old radio that is using 1950s technology. And I'm not really knocking it. It's just fascinating to me. But you can see they've put this, it's like some sort of varnish or lacquer over the chassis. It's not a bad idea. You know, if you live somewhere where it gets humid, it kind of protects the metal from rusting. It seems like actually it's been kept somewhere pretty dry. There's just a lot of dust and stuff everywhere. I also cleaned the contacts on this switch. This thing is hard to turn, by the way. It's pretty stiff. I'm not going to stress it too much because, again, it does work. And the next thing I'm going to do is add a little bit of oil to the tuning condenser bearing, which I assume it has up here. Yeah, this is straight up very familiar to me. This is like 1950s all over the place, which is why I feel like a little more comfortable working on this, because it doesn't look foreign to me. Okay, so what we want to do is make sure that everything here just has just a little bit of oil here. Just a touch. I mean, I probably don't even need to do this, because it's not like someone's going to come in the museum every day of the week and be, oh boy, I can't wait to twist the knobs on that particular radio. I think it's just more for my own, like, satisfaction. All right, I'll put a little bit here. Just gonna work that in a little bit. I already kind of cleaned the volume and tone controls underneath, but I think I'll do it one more time. And then it's time to kind of move over to the cabinet and see how well that clears up, or cleans up. Okay, so this is after a lot of cleaning. It was just really dirty. Like really, really dirty. And I think it might have been in a house where people smoked cigarettes, because definitely a lot of nicotine coating on it, which is maybe why the metal looks so good. I mean, everyone smoked back then. Like, I remember half my mom's family smoked, and it's just a thing people did. And so if you get these old radios and people smoked in the house, like the nicotine will definitely coat everything. But it's a wonderful preservative when it comes to surfaces, because under all that dirt, things tend to clean up pretty well, which is kind of the case with this guy. But what I did is, after I cleaned it up, I used this product that's been around forever. And unfortunately, the label falls off as soon as you start using it. It's called Old English. And it's a kind of a furniture treatment material, and I'm not sure what it's made out of. But it does a really good job of going in and kind of filling in areas that are scratched or, faded with a little bit of stain and magic juice. I have no idea what it's made out of, but it works. But this is just the first step. Now that I've kind of cleaned up the finish, I'm going to wax it, and I'm going to use a Car Wax with a mechanical buffer. And what that'll do is further remove more dirt, and also it'll put a polish, because it's going to do the same thing that you do to your car. Like when you wax it, it looks shiny because the polymers in the wax, or whatever it does from a chemical perspective, makes it shiny. That's not scientific, but anyway, you get the idea. I use a drill attachment because, frankly, my hands are just getting kind of too worn out to do it by hand anymore. But with this one, maybe I'll do a little hand polishing, because it is, again, a little bit different. But I'll start off with a mechanical buffer. Okay, well, this is after, I don't know, probably about close to an hour worth of buffing. Sometimes that actually takes longer than restoring the radios, because, well, I mean, not restoring the radios, restoring the electronics, because you need to go in and get all the details. There was just a lot of, I would describe, like finger grime around the controls, which is understandable. You use something for years and years and you touch it every day, that's just going to happen. And there was a lot of scratches and hazing and stuff going on in the cabinet. And so I used a combination of Novus No. 2 plastic polish and the aforementioned Carnauba wax. Gave it several applications. I wasn't able to get rid of all the crazing. It's still visible, but overall it looks, I think, pretty presentable. I also cleaned the inside a little bit. In fact, I might go over it again. It was really dirty, but now it's all cleaned up. And what I'm doing last, before I call it quits for the evening, because I was going to try to get it done tonight, and I just thought, why am I rushing on this? Just take my time. So tomorrow I'll do maybe a little more final cleanup, maybe a little more final polish, and then I'll do a reassembly and final testing, and then she'll be ready to go. Welcome to day 2 working on the Red Lantern radio, and today, kind of nasty and rainy out there, I got up early and I installed the speaker. No, it's not the right speaker. I only used 2 screws to put in it because I didn't want to drill that many holes in this, but I dug through our supply and I couldn't find any that fit. That's the closest, and I think it'll be fine. And so now that we have I keep on saying we like there's more than one person here. Now that I have the electronics all taken care of and cleaned up, then I can put that back in and do some minor tweaking and see if it will come back to life. All right, well, I got it back together again.
Out of my seat. See, when he...
A una escalada. Los ataques aéreos.
Sorry. Nurses use their lunch break to... Those businessmen had direct...
The 8 games played by the Warriors this season, but now we're over a quarter of the way through. As they play...
State of emergency, correct.
La social...
Bench. So you didn't have your best... Wait, I want to wish you a very blessed...
All right, so here's the front. I haven't put the back on yet. Well, that's inside. Anyway, I've been having it playing for about a couple hours now, and it doesn't seem like it's unhappy. It's working fine, and this is not up all the way. I'm running it at 175 volts versus 220, just because I don't want to, stress it out too much. In all likelihood, this will probably sit on a shelf, and one day we'll have an international exhibit that'll show all of sets from around the world, and this will be one of them. We've got sets from, you name it. Of course, tons from the US, but we've also got stuff from Germany, England, Poland, Czechoslovakia, now China, pre-World War II Japan. I can't even keep track. Spanish radios. We try to, if we get something that we haven't had from one country in particular, we tend to hold on to it. Again, because back then, most of the countries had their own domesticated or domestic electronics producers, and some of them never were sold outside of those countries. They were for domestic consumption only, and this is one of those. Now, people have been telling me I think I mentioned this, that they might have sold these in Hong Kong too. Not sure. Anyhow, I'm glad that it works. It's always fascinating to work on something that I haven't worked on before. Kind of breaks up the monotony a little bit. Thanks so much for watching. I know that maybe I was a little too excitable on this episode, and I apologize for that, but this kind of stuff usually tickles my buttons. So I appreciate you sticking around if you did. Until the next time something comes across the workbench, I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.